A young warrior gasped for breath as he faced a monstrous figure towering before him. The creature, Sebarumus, the feared wingless dragon and dungeon boss with the high level of 67, opened its massive jaws and released a devastating burst of fire. The blaze surged forward and the entire party of adventurers braced themselves for impact. Their sorceress trembled as she cried out in fear. The tank of the party admitted he wasn't sure his defensive skills could withstand such an attack. Before anyone could react, the group's elderly armored veteran stiffened, his widening eyes fixed on something emerging through the flames. Out of the inferno, a small green figure darted forward, a goblin, an impossible sight in such a deadly area. Caballeros snarled and prepared another lethal blast while the party stared in disbelief, whispering among themselves, trying to understand how a creature like that could even exist here. Then, in a burst of impossible speed, the goblin shot forward. It slipped cleanly out of the attack zone and slammed its wooden club into the dragon with brutal force. The blow landed with shocking power. The group froze, unable to process the sight before them. The blonde youth of the party stared blankly, mumbling in disbelief, questioning how something so small could deliver such immense strength. Yet the truth was undeniable. Sebarumus, the mighty wingless dragon, collapsed from a single strike delivered by a goblin. The elderly man then pointed toward a nearby hill where a lone figure stood watching. As the dust settled, the party realized the stranger must have been responsible. Far from the chaos of that battle, the story shifted to an ordinary day in the real world. Kimchi Su worked at a construction site with a bag of cement slung over his shoulder and a strangely cheerful smile on his face. His coworkers noticed his unusual mood and asked why he seemed so happy. Though outwardly smiling, Kim's thoughts wandered inward. He saw himself as nothing more than a weak goblin, ordinary, powerless, stuck at the lowest level in life. Even as he paused to drink water, his mind remained heavy with frustration. Some people, he reflected bitterly, found sudden success, while others like him remained nobodies no matter how much experience they gathered. While he worked, he overheard coworkers talking about Mr. Cha, who had stopped coming to the site. The reason? He was now making a living playing Gate of Heaven, a virtual reality game that had taken the world by storm. Fully immersive, it blurred the line between reality and fantasy, and hidden classes inside the game could lead to real-world wealth. Kim remembered hearing about the game's explosive popularity. The VR equipment grew more expensive as the technology advanced, but internet cafes kept it accessible even for people like him. With rare items selling for cash, a new economy had formed inside the game. His thoughts drifted toward the days he used to truly enjoy the game. Then the scene shifted again, this time into the digital world, where Kim swung his pickaxe and activated his skill, Rock Strike. The attack landed successfully, awarding him 3 ores, but the small gain didn't ease his frustration. Overwhelmed, he screamed, calling the situation ridiculous. No matter how hard he worked, he felt trapped under endless grind and even in-game debt. Tears welled up as he shouted into the cavern, wondering when his story would finally become the fantasy he dreamed of, becoming a hero, marrying a beautiful woman, and living a legendary life. He questioned whether Gate of Heaven was even worth playing anymore. Then he froze. A glimmering object on the ground caught his eye, an advanced healing crystal. His breath hitched. A rare item worth at least 300,000 won. Joy burst through him, pulling wild laughter from his chest. Moments like this, he thought, made all the hardship worth enduring, but his celebration abruptly stopped when he sensed people behind him. A party of players watched him with puzzled expressions. One woman commented on his strange behavior. Embarrassed, Kim turned around slowly, then froze again, this time struck silent by her beauty. She approached him with a gentle smile and said she'd noticed him mining every day, assuming his mining skill must be high. Trying not to seem flustered, he told her he managed well enough. She explained that her group was passing through the dungeon, but a massive boulder blocked the path. Though her party was strong, none had the mining skill needed to break it. She politely asked for his help. Kim hesitated, explaining that his level was low and going deeper could be dangerous. Before he could finish, a short, clearly dwarven member of the group stepped forward and reassured him that he only needed to mine, they would handle any monsters. Kim blinked, surprised to hear such confidence from a dwarf. The dwarf instantly picked up on it, offended, claiming Kim must think dwarves only served as diggers and were useless in battle. Kim considered the offer. Maybe this was a chance to gain decent experience or find valuable ores. But the deeper they were in the dungeon, the heavier the dread he felt, especially with something terrifying rumored to roam the depths of this world. Even in a game with resurrection, its presence made players tremble. The beautiful woman stepped closer again, smiling sweetly. She said he was just her type, strong arms, good at mining. Kim's heart pounded, and without thinking, he agreed. Regret followed immediately. Why had he responded so quickly? Soon after they entered the cave, a monster appeared, a gray wolf, level 7. Kim panicked instantly. The wolf charged with frightening speed, and he screamed at the top of his lungs, calling for his mother like a terrified child. Before the creature reached him, flames burst across the battlefield. A stunning woman, Catherine Lee, unleashed her salamander flame spell, incinerating the wolf with ease. She approached Kim, voice full of concern, asking whether he was hurt. She was a level 39 sorceress, and Kim stared at her in astonishment. He thanked her earnestly. Catherine gently warned him not to wander away again. It was too dangerous. For a moment, Kim wondered if this could be the beginning of the romantic adventure he always dreamed about. Then another teammate arrived, a muscular man who casually dodged monster attacks while scoffing, reminding everyone they weren't here to play around. He activated a skill called Swing of the Giant Wheel, wiping out the remaining monsters in one sweeping strike. He explained that they were searching for a rare ore that required very high mining proficiency to break, hence why they brought Kim. Yet despite needing him, the group's tone made it clear they looked down on him, treating him as nothing more than a tool. Irritation swelled. Kim finally confronted the warrior, insisting he had combat ability too and wouldn't be dismissed so easily. Fueled by anger, he slammed his pickaxe against the wall. Tension rose as the tall man threatened the dwarf, warning him of the consequences if the information proved wrong. Humiliation washed over Kim again. He felt utterly defeated, always disrespected, risking his life for crumbs, stuck at rock bottom no matter what he did. Then the impossible happened. A sudden crack split the air. The boulder burst open. The group stared in stunned silence as a faint glow appeared behind the rubble. Kim stepped back, eyes wide. He had uncovered a hidden door. A hidden dungeon. Excitement rippled through the group, and Kim's voice trembled as he said this discovery could bring enormous rewards, maybe even a chance at unlocking hidden classes. He called it the grand prize. Catherine smirked, questioning whether Kim was truly part of the we, but he was far too thrilled to care. For once, it felt like this could be his breakthrough, his chance to finally change his life, just like Mr. Cha. Then everything shattered. Without warning, the tall man activated PvP mode and struck Kim violently. The blow hurled him to the ground, ripping away 480 of his health points. Kim groaned in pain, struggling to breathe. The man mocked him, saying how hard it had been to reach this hidden dungeon. Catherine joined in, scoffing that something this valuable had been found with nothing more than a low-level mining skill. The tall man sneered that Kim had only been tagging along while they handled all the real fighting, pushing the humiliation even deeper. The truth hit Kim like a second blow. They had turned on him deliberately. They had known about the hidden dungeon all along and used him to open it. The tall man grabbed Kim's head, leaning close with a cruel grin, laughing as he admitted everything. Of course they knew, and since Kim had helped them a little, they'd at least make his death quick. Kim's eyes went wide, stunned by the betrayal. When he regained consciousness, he was still inside the dungeon. For a moment, he wondered if they had spared him, but the sinking realization followed quickly. The advanced healing crystal he carried was shattered. It had activated automatically when his health hit 0, reviving him. He wasn't spared. They had killed him, and the priceless crystal had been consumed. Rage tore out of him, but as he fumed, something else caught his attention. The hidden dungeon door remained open. The dungeon wasn't cleared. After losing something so valuable, there was no turning back. Clenching his fists, Kim swore revenge. He would ruin everything for them. With fire in his chest, he charged at the glowing entrance, shouting that the hidden dungeon was waiting for him. The moment he stepped inside, chaos hit. The floor wasn't flat. There were stairs immediately past the entrance. Unable to stop in time, he tumbled down, slamming painfully against stone. His health dropped another 80 points. Cursing at the absurd placement of the stairs, he groaned on the cold dungeon ground until he finally sat up. Darkness surrounded him. Silence pressed in from every direction. His health hovered dangerously low, barely 20 points left. When he looked ahead, his breath caught. A massive goblin sat on a throne like a king, a glowing label floating above it, Temple of the Goblins. Kim frowned, confused and irritated. This was the big secret, goblins. But the eerie stillness made something feel wrong. He looked around slowly, wondering where the rest of the team was, until he saw the limp hand beside him. He followed the arm and froze. The dwarf lay there, drenched in blood, lifeless. A cold wave washed through Kim. What had happened to him? A glowing screen appeared, asking if Kim had a resurrection skill. He mumbled that he didn't, then half-joked that maybe the dwarf was refusing to press his revive button out of greed. Before he could think further, a red warning blinked across his screen. This dungeon is extremely difficult and far above your current level. Leave immediately. Then a scream ripped through the silence. Kim spun around. It was one of the party members. Suddenly, a monstrous hand lunged out of the shadows, gripping the tall man and crushing him with terrifying force. Kim's breath stopped. This wasn't a goblin. This was something else entirely, something far beyond what should exist here. The creature stepped forward, its grotesque figure looming over the carnage. Its name appeared, Jurger, level 80. Kim's heart hammered. Level 80 here in a goblin temple? Jurger grabbed the tall man again and began to devour him violently. The sounds of bones breaking and flesh tearing filled the room. Kim gagged, clutching his chest, trying not to vomit. Gate of Heaven was known for its deep sensory immersion, pain, emotion, even trauma simulated through its unique system. But safety limits only applied in low-level zones. This dungeon was nothing of the sort. Another scream echoed. Catherine, she was still alive, begging for help. Kim's legs locked. He couldn't move. What could he possibly do against a monster like that? He remembered the rare cases where overwhelming pain inside the game led to real-world consequences, brain damage, even death. Terror seized him. He turned and ran, panting, stumbling, swearing he wouldn't die here. He repeated to himself that it wasn't his fault, they had betrayed him first. Then a strange message appeared. The Goblin Lord senses a resemblance between you and him in cowardice and weakness. Kim froze, staring at the Goblin Lord sitting on the throne. Something inside him cracked. Was this really what he was, weak and cowardly? Kim clenched his fists, grinding his teeth. With a trembling voice full of sadness and fury, he whispered that he didn't want to be that way. His eyes dropped to Catherine's battered, broken body as Jurger trampled her, blood splattering across the stone. He choked on a sob. Memories of his real life crashed down, crushing debt left by parents he never knew, jobs he couldn't secure, humiliation that followed him everywhere. No respect in the real world, no respect in the game. He wanted to fight monsters, to be strong, to live with dignity. Instead, he was shoved into mining. Tears streamed down his face. He shouted that he had never achieved anything he wanted, and he hadn't done anything wrong to deserve being labeled weak. Wiping his tears, he stepped toward the Goblin Lord with burning determination. He demanded to know what gave a goblin the right to look down on him. A message popped up. He had become an honorary goblin, and goblins would aid him from now on. Immediately after, another notification appeared. He had met the conditions to unlock a hidden class. The prompt asked if he wished to change his class to Goblin Summoner. Kim stared in disbelief. A hidden class, but he burst into bitter laughter and refused, calling the idea ridiculous. The system ignored him. It coldly announced that the class change had already been completed. Frustration consumed him, but before he could process anything, Jurger returned with a monstrous roar, closing in on him. Escape was impossible. There was no running this time. Forced to act, Kim used one of his new skills and summoned a goblin. A tiny, thin, pathetic-looking creature appeared, shrieking. Kim felt instant disappointment. He planned to use it as bait so he could flee. He ordered the goblin to attack, shouting desperately at it to take down the monster. To his shock, the goblin charged with ferocity. Jurger lunged for the kill, and Kim instinctively tried to escape but froze mid-step. The small goblin struck with unbelievable strength. Damage numbers exploded 100 million. Jurger collapsed instantly, defeated. Kim stood in silence, unable to comprehend what he had witnessed. His experience bar skyrocketed. Messages flooded his screen, new skills, goblin feeding, goblin walking. The summoned goblin's experience soared as well. Slowly, Kim realized the truth. The weak-looking goblin was actually the strongest possible, max level. His thoughts jolted back to the gruesome image of Jurger devouring the tall man. In the real world, Catherine, still wearing her VR headset, stared at the horrifying scene. Shock overtook her. She screamed uncontrollably. A staff member rushed over, pulling off her headset in panic. He quickly realized she had suffered severe psychological trauma, so severe she would never return to the game. She had effectively reached permanent retirement. Back inside the game, Kim's summoned goblin continued rampaging through the dungeon. Each strike dealt millions in damage. Kim's level rose rapidly until he told the goblin to stop so he could gather loot. His bag filled with mana stones, wolf claws, and countless valuable drops. He grinned. The moment Jurger fell, the dungeon was considered cleared. Everyone else in his team was dead. The only way out now was through death. He glanced at the goblin that had solo cleared the dungeon and noticed its level hadn't increased at all. Meanwhile, he had shot up to level 31. Curious, he tried opening the goblin's status window, but the system refused. Information unavailable. Confusion mixed with awe. How could something so weak-looking be this strong? Was it a glitch, a bug? Then excitement erupted through him. It didn't matter. What mattered was exploiting it before anyone fixed it. He boldly declared he would no longer work as a miner. He would climb to the top of Gate of Heaven. The next day, Kim walked into N-Bank. When his number was called, he sat before the clerk. She told him the wolf claws were worth 97.01 and asked if he wanted the money transferred to his account. Kim asked for it to be sent elsewhere instead. Then he remembered he had more items to sell and listed them. At the mention of Jurger's membrane and heart, the clerk froze. Her eyes widened. She was stunned by the immense value. Without hesitation, she called for the bank manager, leaving Kim confused as to why she needed someone else when he was sitting right there. Kim sat across from the manager of N-Bank as the man poured tea with a warm smile. When asked how the tea tasted, Kim stared at the cup and replied flatly that it was cold. The manager awkwardly admitted he had forgotten to boil the water. Raising an eyebrow, Kim asked why the manager had called him in personally. The man leaned forward, smiling politely as he explained that there were better ways for Kim to invest his money. Leaving it in a standard account would be wasteful. He presented an investment plan promising excellent returns. Kim frowned, confused, asking whether something like that really required the manager's personal involvement. The man's smile widened as he hinted that Kim must understand the value of the items he brought. He went on to explain that Jurger's membrane and heart were worth a massive sum. When he stated the exact value, 230 million, Kim froze, teacup suspended in his hand as he tried to absorb the news. Later, outside the bank, Kim held the goblin affectionately and excitedly told it that thanks to its help, he had managed to pay off 10% of his debts. He joked with it like it were a small pet, even claiming he didn't think it looked ugly. But a second later, he silently admitted he couldn't lie that boldly. As they walked through the city, Kim attempted to keep the goblin hidden, but to his surprise, he couldn't unsummon it. The goblin suddenly shrieked loudly, drawing immediate attention. People mocked its bizarre appearance, asking who would summon something so strange and why it was out in public. Humiliation burned through Kim when bystanders even mistook him for the goblin simply because he stood next to it. Rage simmered inside him. Trying to slip away, he tugged the goblin aside, but it approached a passerby and began provoking them, escalating the scene. At that moment, a large, furious man named Patton pushed his way forward, loudly protesting the sight of a goblin wandering freely. Whispered jokes rippled through the crowd calling him the Destroyer, though few seemed to know him. Kim's expression shifted to concern. Anyone calling himself the Destroyer clearly wasn't just some random player. Panic rose in Kim as he hurried to explain that the goblin wasn't hostile, but Patton ignored him and launched a fierce attack. In a blink, the goblin responded with lightning speed, countering with a devastating blow that instantly overwhelmed Patton. A system message appeared on Kim's interface, noting that PK mode had activated and pain levels were being restricted to prevent high-level players from bullying weaker ones. The crowd stood frozen, horrified. Whispers spread as they questioned how such a small goblin could defeat someone like Patton so easily. Kim's heartbeat quickened. If people learned that this terrifying goblin belonged to him, things would spiral beyond control. His anxiety surged. Just as he feared, several members of Patton's guild appeared. Their leader Hayak mocked Patton for losing to such a puny creature and called it disgraceful. Then Hayak turned to Kim, disdain dripping from his voice as he dismissed the goblin as worthless, but insisted it still needed to be punished for damaging their guild. The tension grew rapidly. But before he could continue, the goblin abruptly attacked, using rock throw. With terrifying speed, it struck one of the guild members, Minong, master of speed, and delivered a massive blow that instantly took him down. Rage exploded among the guild. Kim stood stunned, watching the situation escalate beyond anything he had prepared for. Feeling the looming danger, he turned and sprinted away, barely escaping the chaos. As he ran, regret filled him. He had believed the goblin would make his life easier, but everything was falling apart. He had been naive to think a creature this powerful wouldn't cause trouble. While he fled, a mysterious old man appeared in front of him and urgently demanded that Kim follow. There was no time to explain. Kim hesitated only briefly before following in desperation, but dread washed over him when he realized he'd been tricked. The old man had led him straight into an ambush. Laughing mockingly, the man declared this was Kim's path to death. Suddenly, a system message flashed across Kim's vision, congratulating him for his cleverness. It claimed the Goblin Lord admired his cunning use of the enemy's weakness and distraction. Kim's blood boiled. "Cunning!" he shouted furiously. First, the Goblin Lord mocked him as weak and pathetic, and now the system labeled him cunning. None of this was fair. He hadn't caused any of it, the others had. They invited him, betrayed him, attacked him for no reason. Taking a deep breath, Kim looked at his goblin with determined fire in his eyes. He muttered that he was sick of being seen as weak. Things were going to change. He swore revenge. He would destroy the Everton Guild. The goblin perked up at his declaration, full of excitement. Meanwhile, two guild members, Jae-hyun and Inuk the Shadow, leapt across rooftops, tracking Kim and his goblin. Jae-hyun questioned why Inuk felt the need to accompany her on such a simple task, claiming she could handle it alone. But Inuk warned her not to underestimate the goblin. Patton had been the guild's weakest member, yet the creature had taken him down instantly. There was something deeply wrong with this goblin. As they spoke, a scream erupted below. Both stopped, shocked. They looked down to see their guildmate Sungriel, the Cunning, thrown violently through the air. Horror filled Inuk as the goblin appeared behind them, sending a cold chill along his spine. Inuk launched a fierce attack, but to his disbelief, the goblin didn't even flinch. The attack did absolutely nothing. His panic surged. The creature was real and impossibly powerful. In a frantic attempt to save himself, he struck again, but the goblin dodged effortlessly. Fear drowned him. From behind, Jae-hyun yelled angrily, scolding him for freezing up. She couldn't fathom how he was letting a goblin overpower him. Inuk tried to steady himself, insisting it was just a small goblin, but doubt gnawed at him. How could something so weak-looking deal millions in damage? No explanation made sense. Then he activated his special skill, Absolute Evil. Power surged through him, drastically boosting his strength at the cost of 90% of his speed. He muttered irritably, frustrated by how far the situation had escalated. Jae-hyun watched in disbelief. Using such a high mana skill against a goblin made no sense. She assumed it must have auto-triggered under the pressure. With the skill active, Inuk shifted into reverse fist stance, increasing his attack power further while lowering critical hit chance. Realizing they needed to finish this quickly, Jae-hyun finally relented and activated storm arrows, removing all slowing effects. She grumbled in frustration, annoyed she had to waste such a powerful ability on a goblin. Storm arrows cleansed Inuk's debuffs, restoring his speed. He lunged forward, fury blazing, delivering a fast, powerful strike. When his fist connected, a cold wave of disbelief swept over him. 0 damage. He froze. 0 again. Nothing worked. Before he could process it, the goblin grinned, a sinister expression that chilled him to the core. Without warning, it launched a devastating surprise attack, dealing millions of damage. Inuk collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony. Jae-hyun stood frozen, unable to comprehend what she had just seen. Slowly, realization dawned on her. This goblin was far beyond ordinary. Kim watched with a dark smile as he approached her. Satisfaction gleamed in his eyes as he finally revealed the truth. He was the one who had summoned the goblin. Jae-hyun's shock deepened as she stared at him. Everything had changed in an instant. But Kim, now wearing a deranged, distorted grin, dismissed her shock with chilling ease. With a voice sharp with anger, he told her it was none of her business and that he was beyond furious. Jae-hyun trembled, her nerves on edge, and demanded to know what he wanted from her and what she had done to deserve any of this. Kim's cruel smile widened unnervingly as he claimed it was all her fault, that she had started everything. Her blood ran cold and she screamed, calling him insane. Realizing how his words sounded, Kim quickly tried to correct himself, stammering that she had misunderstood. He insisted it wasn't what she thought. She had attacked him first, which was why he and the goblin were angry. But Jae-hyun wasn't calming down. Her panic escalated into frantic screams. Kim felt embarrassment burning through him. This wasn't how any of it was supposed to go. Flustered, he snapped at the goblin to stop her from screaming. The commotion drew attention as people nearby heard the chaos. When they spotted Kim and Jae-hyun on the rooftop, one pointed and shouted that it was the same group seen earlier. Kim's heart dropped as a crowd gathered below, panic spreading among them. Voices rose in terror as rumors spread. The goblin had destroyed the Everton Guild and was now going to kill the last woman, so were they next. Kim felt overwhelmed. He had never intended for things to escalate this far. Desperation filled his voice as he yelled at the goblin to stop and leave her alone. To his surprise, the goblin obeyed instantly, freezing mid-attack. Jae-hyun remained paralyzed in fear while the crowd below stared in awe. What they saw was a low-level player in beginner gear boldly commanding a monster that had defeated the Everton Guild. They didn't see the truth, they only saw courage. The cheers began immediately. "Good luck," someone shouted. "You can do it, beat that goblin." Kim stood stunned. Praise was the last thing he expected. They believed he was the hero trying to save Jae-hyun from the monster. Confusion flooded him, but their admiration grew louder. He realized they had completely misunderstood. A strange mix of shock and disbelief consumed him. His imagination twisted the scene further. He pictured Jae-hyun looking at him with gratitude while he dramatically ordered the goblin to back off. He imagined delivering a heroic line like, "Your time is up," reveling in the thrill of appearing fearless. The idea of being seen as a hero excited him, and a dark, eerie laugh escaped his throat. The excitement intensified as he considered how the crowd must now view him, a savior who had protected the woman from the rampaging goblin. He laughed louder, basking in the fantasy. But as he approached Jae-hyun, his expression shifted into something far more terrifying. He wanted her to understand who held the power now. Coming close, he threatened her, asking whether she wanted to die painfully like her guildmates. He ordered her to swear never to reveal anything about him or the goblin. Terrified, Jae-hyun agreed immediately. Kim's smile softened into something serene once she promised. But his demeanor shifted again as he theatrically shouted at the goblin, accusing it of attacking innocent villagers and causing chaos. The crowd watched, utterly stunned, as Kim passionately proclaimed he would stop the monster. He activated Goblin Walk, summoning chains that wrapped around the goblin's neck and dragged it forward. The goblin's bewildered expression made it clear it didn't understand any of this, but Kim continued his dramatic display, slamming it to the ground and pulling it with a confidence that left the crowd gasping. Whispers spread, chains of light, a skill capable of restraining monsters. How could someone from a beginner village possess such advanced abilities? Admiration surged as people watched. A system message informed Kim that the goblin's mood had improved thanks to Goblin Walk. Watching from afar, Jae-hyun murmured in sudden realization that the Everton Guild failed because Kim's level had to be above 50. Gasps spread among the crowd. They now believed the guild had failed not from weakness, but because Kim was overwhelmingly strong. Still pretending to struggle, Kim activated his skill again, pushing the goblin away. Then, with dramatic flair, he summoned goblin-specific food using goblin feeding and threw it far into the distance. "This is your end," he shouted. The goblin darted after the food with incredible speed. Kim seized the chance and shouted for the gates to be closed immediately. The city gates slammed shut just as the goblin exited, leaving the crowd sighing in collective relief. "Is it really over?" they murmured, exhausted but secretly pleased. Kim softly asked if everyone was okay. The crowd erupted in celebration, cheering and thanking him. His heart swelled. He had gone from near public enemy to celebrated hero. Jae-hyun approached him somberly. She explained that all her guildmates had respawned at the Resurrection Temple in Pascal, and she alone knew the truth about him and the goblin. Kim recognized her as the same woman from earlier. She reassured him she would keep her promise. Kim asked her if Pascal was truly a sacred zone where players had infinite HP and complete protection from monsters and players alike. Suddenly, his expression twisted darkly. He threatened her, saying that if she ever broke her oath, he would find a way to kill her repeatedly at the Resurrection Temple, tormenting her endlessly. Horrified, Jae-hyun screamed and insisted she would never betray him. Finally feeling a sense of relief, Kim lay down later, thinking about how everything had spiraled so far beyond what he ever intended. But then regret pricked at him as he remembered Catherine. He hadn't been able to save her. The thought weighed heavily on him. Suddenly, he remembered something crucial, the goblin point he had received from the Goblin Lord. A panel appeared showing his name and class. Kim Soo, Goblin Summoner with 1 goblin point. He scoffed, wondering if goblins would start calling him their brother if he kept gaining points earned not through strength but by trickery. Curiously, he opened the goblin skill shop. Most options were locked, leaving only one available skill, Goblin Gathering. With a sigh, he selected it. Before he could question what it did, a violent force burst into his room, the same summoned goblin tearing inside. Kim screamed in panic, realizing Goblin Gathering was another summoning skill. Fearing discovery, he frantically tried to calm the goblin. A sudden knock hit the door. The innkeeper asked if he was all right. Caught off guard, Kim warned the man to leave if he didn't want to die, then awkwardly corrected himself, telling him simply to go away. He rushed to calm the goblin, apologizing and asking it to let go of whatever it was holding. Later that night, Kim sat beside the goblin, quietly venting about the unfairness of everything that had happened. He spoke softly about being mocked and attacked despite doing nothing wrong. Looking at the goblin, he murmured that they were the same. The goblin let out a small sound, as if agreeing. Lying on his bed beside it, Kim muttered bitterly that the world was full of bad people. Elsewhere in the city, the tavern doors swung open and a staff member greeted incoming guests. Inside, several members of the Everton Guild sat gathered around a table. One of them suddenly pointed toward the entrance and sharply remarked that the person who had just walked in was the jerk from yesterday. Kim, clearly flustered, shyly admitted it was indeed him. Trying to soften the moment, he mentioned he was also the one who had saved a member of their guild, though he felt uneasy being in a crowded place without his goblin. The Harbinger of Death fixed his piercing gaze on Kim and said that, after what had happened, there was no reason for Kim to help them, but he thanked him anyway. The coldness in In's voice terrified Kim, and he begged him not to thank him while wearing such a frightening expression. Giant reassured In there was no need to be cautious. Kim didn't look like someone looking for a fight. Yet deep down, she knew they were being completely fooled. Kim, still hiding the truth about his goblin, confirmed their assumption and admitted that despite their previous attempt to kill him, he had helped them because he needed something. Enoch acknowledged Kim's honesty and agreed that they owed him. The Everton Guild never forgot a favor, he said, and they would help however they could. Kim explained that he no longer had any reason to remain in the beginner zone. Now that he was past level 30, he wanted to move on to a new region and asked if they knew how to reach it. In asked if he meant F-Journal and said he might know someone who could help. Just then an old man interrupted from across the room, claiming he knew exactly how to get there. Approaching Kim, he apologized sincerely for their earlier encounter. In a calm tone, he explained that after seeing what Kim had managed with 1 goblin, it was clear he was incredibly strong. Patton the Destroyer, level 28, chimed in irritably, admitting that Kim might even be stronger than they were, though the thought annoyed him. Kim immediately denied the idea internally. He knew he wasn't stronger. If In had actually attacked him yesterday, he would have died in a single hit. The beginner zone leaf consisted of 5 standard dungeons. The Slime Fields, the Mine, the Dark Forest, and others. These were open-field dungeons players could enter freely. The old man explained that if Kim wanted to leave the Leaf Zone, he needed to clear a raid boss dungeon. Curious, Kim asked what exactly a raid boss dungeon was. The old man clarified that unlike open-field dungeons, raid dungeons had gates that opened and closed at specific times, with limited entry attempts and strict time limits. In added that the raid boss dungeon was the final challenge of every region and required players to be high-level before attempting it. The Leaf Raid only opened once a month, and everyone was currently gathered to prepare for that event. Kim realized their presence wasn't coincidence. Something big was going on. In confirmed it, the dungeon had opened yesterday, but everything was ruined because a certain goblin appeared and destroyed the entire attempt. Kim froze, stunned by the revelation. He was now stuck in Leaf for another full month until the raid boss reopened. Fury erupted inside him. He had earned over $200,000 from defeating a level 80 monster. With the goblin, he could probably clear even harder dungeons. And now he was supposed to waste an entire month doing nothing. He snapped. In a burst of rage, he grabbed In by the collar and demanded to know if there was any other way out. In calmly told him there wasn't. Everyone else was frustrated too. Their chance had also been wasted. In added that with this conversation, the guild's debt to Kim was settled. The Everton Guild began preparing to leave. Kim stood there, visibly disappointed and frustrated. As they headed out, Giant looked back at him sympathetically before following the others into the night. Outside, under the quiet darkness, the guild members departed. Hidden behind a wooden crate, the goblin peeked out, laughing softly to itself. Suddenly it lifted its head, sensing something odd. The night sky was calm, but the air shifted unexpectedly. Without warning, the raid boss dungeon gate, which should have remained closed for 30 days, creaked open. A system message appeared before Kim. Raid boss dungeon has been opened. Shock rippled through everyone. The old man stared in disbelief, insisting that another raid shouldn't open for 30 days. In's eyes narrowed. It wasn't supposed to happen. Before Kim could process it, another message appeared. Raid boss dungeon has reopened. Kim stood frozen, stunned. Peyton shook his head in astonishment. The raid boss dungeon has already reopened. They gathered before the open gate, their faces filled with shock. In asked the old man how many people were inside. The old man replied that no one was there. The prepared team had already cleared it yesterday and moved on to the next area. That means we're the only ones here now, In muttered. Kim's eyes gleamed with hostility. I knew something felt off. His voice sharpened as he glared at the guild. You're trying to trick me into falling behind so you can go ahead. You betrayed me. Rage boiled inside him. I should have known better than to trust you. I won't let you enjoy the rewards without me. Giant, startled, tried to deny his accusation, insisting he misunderstood, but In cut her off with calm finality. Do you want to join us or not, Kim? Kim's anger twisted across his face, but he snarled that he wasn't letting them go in alone. In nodded and began explaining their plan. The dungeon was rumored to be a single room with the boss at the start, and though their levels were much higher, they needed to be cautious. Patton snorted arrogantly. We don't need caution. Even without our leader, we have all of Everton's top members. We'll finish this in 10 seconds. In flinched at the arrogance but pushed forward. Let's begin. They approached the gate. Kim whispered to the goblin behind the crate to stay hidden until summoned. Checking his inventory, he spotted an advanced healing stone, something that should have triggered earlier when he died. He had no idea why it hadn't, but decided to ignore it. He rushed toward the gate and crossed into the dungeon. The moment he stepped inside, he gasped. The environment was completely new. So this is the raid boss dungeon, he murmured in awe. Suddenly, a massive steel giant level 40 appeared before them. Panic erupted as the team screamed. A system message flashed, hidden dungeon. Steel Giant's lair. In turned to the old man, furious. What kind of plan is this? The old man shook his head in confusion. I don't know anything about this. Giant shouted in fear, telling Kim to run toward the gate. But Kim only smirked and mocked them. Run, are you backing out now? He challenged them, insisting the rewards were too valuable to give up. If they retreated, he'd take everything for himself. A guild member snapped back, reminding him that a level 40 boss could cause serious consequences, far more than a regular kill. But Kim remained confident. The level difference was only 10, he argued. Injuries at worst, nothing permanent. Rewards like these didn't come easily. He activated his goblin summoner skill. Goblin, come save me. But the goblin remained outside the dungeon, confused and unable to respond. The steel giant roared and charged. Kim screamed in panic, yelling for the goblin to appear, but the summon failed. The steel giant struck with crushing force. Kim was killed instantly. A system message announced his death. Peyton looked down at Kim's corpse, mocking him. He couldn't believe this was the same man who had fought the goblin yesterday. In dismissed the death coldly. We don't care what happens to him. But his expression shifted when the gate suddenly closed behind them. The old man's voice was grave. They had underestimated the dungeon. Hidden dungeons emerging from standard raids were extremely rare, and that explained the level 40 steel giant. They had no choice but to fight. Meanwhile, Kim gasped awake with a scream of pain. Shock overwhelmed him. What the hell, I'm over level 30, how did I die in one hit? Then his face fell. Regret hit him like a brick. He had completely forgotten to allocate his stat points. 26 unused points that could have changed everything. He had also forgotten to summon the goblin first. The treasure, it was so close, he muttered bitterly, rage boiling again. He cursed the goblin for not responding fast enough. Just then, the Everton team leader, energized and determined, shouted for everyone to attack and begin the hunt. Kim's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was not how things were supposed to unfold. Without hesitation, Jae-hyun launched her special skill, Wind Arrow, doubling everyone's speed as the team prepared for combat. In the shadow and Minang, the Speed Master dashed forward with incredible swiftness, moving to strike the steel giant. The old man called out tactical commands, instructing In-huk and Minang to attack first and pinpoint the monster's weak point. Thanks to Jae-hyun's speed boost, the monster would have difficulty countering. Working in perfect sync, In-hong and Minang launched their attacks from opposite angles. The steel giant roared in defiance, tanking their blows with shocking resilience. Undeterred, the two quickly coordinated, activating sequential slash, a joint skill of 16 consecutive hits. The old man studied the monster closely, anticipating a pattern. Every monster had a weak point, he said. If they hit hard enough, they would find it. After the flurry of strikes, In-huk turned to Minang, asking if he had found anything. Minang shook his head, his expression confused. The total damage dealt was 0. In frowned deeply. There were only two explanations. Either the monster's defense was absurdly high or they were overlooking something important. The steel giant's furious roar confirmed something was unusual. Before anyone could analyze further, In-huk surged forward again, his cloak whipping behind him as he unleashed a powerful strike using Peerless Blade. The ground trembled from the impact, but even so, he had to admit their weaker attacks were useless. Its passive ability, Hatred of the Weak, nullified any blow dealing less than 5% of its total HP. Peyton shouted in frustration, claiming In-huk was the only one capable of doing real damage to a level 40 monster. But the old man shook his head. In-huk wasn't the strongest attacker here. Depending on the situation, someone else surpassed him. Jae-hyun stepped forward, resolve in her eyes. She prepared her secret, powerful skill, Final Death Arrow. If the guild knew she possessed this, they would try to make her their leader. Peyton stared at her in disbelief. He didn't know what the skill did, but promised to buy her time at any cost. He activated War Cry, roaring to draw the monster's attention. The steel giant bellowed back and focused entirely on him. Kim, still on the ground, watched with irritation and anxiety, calling Peyton an idiot for provoking the monster instead of retreating. The steel giant struck with crushing force, dealing massive damage, but Peyton survived and mocked the monster, claiming he expected more. The old man shouted in panic, warning Peyton not to get careless. Their success hinged on precision. To support him, the old man activated pain sharing, splitting incoming damage between himself and Peyton, with the higher HP member taking more. Kim watched with confusion. None of them had hidden classes and their levels were relatively low, yet their coordination and strength were astounding. The assassination team leader explained their strategy. The warriors would distract the monster while the assassins reduced its defense through weak point reduction, a passive skill that reduced enemy defense by 2% with a 1% chance per hit, stacking up to 5 times. Kim stared in awe. Was this the true power of a well-organized guild? But frustration gnawed at him. As long as he remained dead, he would gain nothing, not a single experience point or reward. He feared losing everything. Suddenly, the steel giant locked onto Peyton again. Startled, Peyton yelled angrily at the monster, asking why it was looking elsewhere when he was clearly the enemy. The monster slammed the ground with overwhelming force, revealing its immense power. Kim decided he had enough. He stood up and activated the advanced healing stone. Sarcastically, he declared he couldn't watch these losers fight anymore. Since he was the highest level, he would help them. A system message confirmed the healing stone revived him with 100 HP after death. Kim smirked, telling himself the hero always arrives late. Then, the system announced the steel giant had selected Kim Chil-soo as its target. The steel giant unleashed Surface Destruction, a wide area skill that instantly killed multiple teammates. Kim screamed in frustration, wishing he had revived earlier. Bodies flew across the battlefield as the attack ravaged the team. Severely injured, Peyton stared in horror at the fallen members and shouted furiously at the monster for harming his allies. The old man warned him not to lose focus, but Peyton ignored him and charged with Giant Slash. Despite its power, the attack only dealt 3890 damage, barely a scratch on the monster. The old man continued using pain sharing, but when the rebound struck him, he took a crushing 2456 HP of damage. He muttered in agony that the plan had failed. A system message appeared. Peyton the Destroyer and the old man had died. Kim froze, horrified. Confusion and guilt swirled inside him before he shouted defensively, claiming none of it was his fault. All he did was revive himself. At that moment, In the Shadow reappeared, ready to resume battle. He analyzed the situation quickly, noting that monsters typically targeted healers or ranged fighters first. Peyton's war cry had forced it onto him, but Kim's sudden resurrection had disrupted its priority, causing the monster to switch targets and wipe out the team before they could react. Jae-hyun, the bringer of death, nervously asked if she should fire her arrow. Her skill, one-shot death bow, consumed her HP and she only had 46% left. In-huk screamed at her not to shoot yet. Their defense-reducing stacks were only at 3 out of 5, nowhere near enough. If she fired prematurely, everything would be over. He ordered her to hold her skill no matter what. If she missed her chance, they had zero hope. Kim hesitantly asked if he could help somehow, but Jae-hyun snapped, mocking him and asking what he could possibly do without his goblin. She told him to do nothing. He was only a nuisance. Kim wondered sadly why she looked at him like that. Was it just because he didn't have his goblin? He began blaming the others internally, smiling crazily as he convinced himself they were the real culprits. He thought bitterly of his goblin level 999 and muttered that he'd just let them all die. Suddenly, the steel giant selected Jae-hyun as its next target and charged at her with terrifying speed. In realized the monster was acting exactly as predicted, targeting the long-range damage dealer. He tried to pull the monster's attention back to himself, shouting for it to fight him instead. He unleashed Twin Blade Frenzy, dealing 1920 damage. The steel giant retaliated immediately with a monstrous roar. In leaped high, barely dodging the strike, and shouted that the battle wasn't over. He attacked again, dealing another 1980 damage. A third time, 1912 damage. Finally, the monster began to see him as a threat. Its HP stood at 22,460 out of 30,000. In was frustrated it took that much effort despite the 3 stacks of defense reduction. He knew he needed to stall for Jae-hyun. He taunted the monster again, asking if it was angry yet, and activated Rapid Evasion, a skill letting him dodge all physical attacks for 3 seconds. But suddenly a terrifying system message appeared. He didn't have enough mana. Horror washed over him. Without the skill, he took the full brunt of the monster's next attack and was sent flying, screaming in agony. His body collapsed at Kim's feet. A system message declared In the Shadow had died. Kim stood in shock, then exploded in hysteria, screaming that the team was stupid and weak. He regretted reviving, insisting he should have stayed dead. Jonah shouted back, furious, saying his revival ruined everything. If she had 10 more seconds, she could have finished the monster. Kim yelled that he'd rather everyone die than let them take the rewards without him. The steel giant released another earth-shaking roar, and both Kim and Jae-hyun turned toward it, screaming in fear as a system message confirmed the monster had chosen Jae-hyun, the bringer of death, as its next target. The monster charged toward them with horrifying speed. Jae-hyun stopped arguing at once and screamed that now wasn't the time for blame. She prepared to fire her arrow immediately, even though the skill wasn't fully charged, but froze when she saw Kim standing strangely close beside her. Confused, she demanded to know what he was doing. Kim turned toward her with a sinister smile. He reminded her that she couldn't move while charging her arrow, right? Alarmed, Jae-hyun stammered anxiously, asking what he was planning. She screamed for him not to come near her, but Kim suddenly grabbed her and sprinted at full speed. As she flailed in panic, he shouted that she had been the one who said she needed 10 more seconds. Jae-hyun continued shrieking as Kim leapt forward, dodging the monster's attack at the last possible moment. He burst into wild laughter, exhilarated by the danger. From a distance, Giant stared in disbelief, questioning how Kim was moving so fast, almost like In the Shadow himself. In his mind, Kim revealed he had dumped all 26 of his unspent stat points into speed, becoming fast enough to rival elite assassins. In that same moment, Kim realized that his earlier clash with Giant had earned him another goblin point. He wondered if the Goblin Lord was trying to imply he had been the one in the wrong. Before he could dwell on it, Jae-hyun shouted that her arrow was ready. Kim yelled back for her to fire immediately. Jae-hyun protested nervously, insisting that if she missed, everything was lost. She begged him not to pressure her. Kim ignored her pleas and hoisted her over his shoulder, screaming that she owed him compensation for the blood he'd lost and the expensive healing stone he had used. The steel giant began spinning its massive body, preparing a devastating area attack. It unleashed the blow with tremendous force, scattering debris everywhere. At that critical moment, Jae-hyun finally released one-shot death bow, her ultimate skill, aiming it at the monster while Kim charged in closer with her in his arms, shouting frantically for her to finish it. But as she prepared to release the decisive shot, the steel giant roared again and activated an overwhelming ability, world destruction. Debris blasted outward in all directions. Kim stared in disbelief. The monster had been hiding such a terrifying move. He quickly realized the attack covered the entire area and remembered Jae-hyun had only 18 HP left while he had 100 due to his recent revival. Both would die instantly if the attack connected. Jae-hyun tried desperately to aim, but the flying debris made it impossible. She said she couldn't take a clean shot. Kim shouted that he was beginning to see something strange. Thinking it was a solution, she demanded to know what it was, only to be stunned when he explained it was just a flashback of his childhood memories. Jae-hyun groaned sarcastically that he was just seeing his life flash before his eyes. Suddenly, a rift tore open in the air. A clawed hand reached through. Kim's goblin emerged, stepping into the dungeon by ripping through space itself, laughing maniacally. Kim erupted into rage, screaming that the goblin had taken far too long to appear, claiming it felt like an entire week since he'd used the summoning skill. Jae-hyun stared in pure disbelief, unable to process what she had just witnessed. She wondered if the goblin had actually torn open the fabric of the dungeon, something that should have been impossible. Kim then excitedly announced he was using a secret defensive skill, Goblin Shield. The steel giant roared, readying what seemed to be its final attack. Kim smirked mockingly, saying those were bold last words for a hidden dungeon boss. He and Jae-hyun stood behind the goblin, declaring that the final moment of the fight had arrived. Jae-hyun released her fully charged one-shot death bow, firing a devastating 22,524 damage shot. The attack pierced through the steel giant's body. Cracks spread across its form until it collapsed to the ground. A system message announced that the hidden dungeon, Steel Giant's Chamber, had been cleared. Jae-hyun stood in awe, repeating joyfully that they had actually won. They had cleared a hidden dungeon. A message appeared announcing her level had risen from 27 to 31. Another notified Kim that he had risen from level 31 to level 34. He jumped in hysterical excitement, screaming to know what reward he had earned. A system message stated that all members who had fallen during the raid were revived upon the dungeon's completion. The team leader in the black cloak asked urgently if everyone was all right. One member replied that he tasted blood, but he was fine. They expressed relief the monster had been defeated, admitting that if it had been even slightly higher level, they would have been doomed. The black-cloaked leader looked sharply at Kim and Jae-hyun and demanded an explanation for what had just happened. But Kim was acting strangely, hugging all the dropped loot and screaming hysterically for everyone to stay away. Jae-hyun hesitated, telling the leader she had no idea how to explain Kim's behavior. Then a system message appeared before Kim, shocking him. He had not fulfilled the requirements for a hidden class. Jae-hyun received the same message and was equally disappointed. She wondered why clearing a hidden dungeon wasn't enough to qualify. Kim thought deeply. Just as he received the Goblin class due to the Goblin Lord's favor, there must be other conditions inside the dungeon required for unlocking a hidden class. He realized it probably needed to happen before defeating the boss, but decided there was no point worrying about it now. He screamed again, insisting he needed to collect all the loot immediately. Jae-hyun yelled at him to stop, reminding him that although she delivered the final blow, the entire team contributed and the rewards should be shared. But Kim continued screaming wildly, gripping the loot tighter. The leader and another member watched Kim with mocking surprise, wondering aloud if he was turning into Gollum because of his obsession. Kim shouted that the loot was precious to him. The leader calmly reminded him that despite helping twice, they had achieved their primary goal and didn't intend to be greedy. This surprised Kim. He hadn't expected them to be so generous. Suddenly, the old man approached and smacked him hard on the head, scolding that he had warned In Huck from the start not to cause trouble. Kim exploded in anger, accusing the guild of betraying him twice. But the leader replied calmly that removing Kim would not be difficult. If they wanted to use force, they already would have. Then he pointed to Kim and said he could keep all the loot. But he added that one particular item, the bow Kim had picked up, was a unique weapon, the Iron Giant's bow, a powerful archer-class item. Kim panicked, shouting in fear, asking what that meant since he didn't know how to use it. He realized internally that the bow was bound to a specific class and couldn't be used or sold unless he became an archer. Even so, he stubbornly declared he wanted to keep it, arguing everyone else had unique items except him. One member yelled for him to stop being greedy and hand the bow to Jae-hyun, the bringer of death. Kim replied with a cunning smile, agreeing to give it away if they gave him something in return. The leader was stunned, pointing out that unique items couldn't be traded or sold, making the bow immensely valuable. Kim laughed maniacally, saying they would have to buy it from him anyway if they wanted it. A guild member watching muttered in disgust that Kim really did resemble that insane goblin. Meanwhile, Kim's goblin peered nervously from behind some rocks, uneasy about Kim cooperating with the Everton Guild. Jae-hyun held the unique bow and commented that it was very heavy. Kim sarcastically thanked the guild for the exchange. The black-cloaked leader remarked that Kim had a remarkable talent for making people hate him. He asked Kim where he planned to go next. Kim answered confidently it should be obvious. With a wicked smile, he said he was going somewhere they weren't. The leader commented that Kim was truly twisted. He then agreed with Kim's idea and asked the others if they were ready to leave. As they headed out, Giant sent Kim a lingering glance filled with curiosity. Kim and his goblin stood together, ready to depart as well. A final system message confirmed the hidden raid dungeon had been successfully completed. Kim reflected on the situation as he examined his rewards. Losing the unique bow was unfortunate, but the thief's glove he received, while only a consumable, was incredibly valuable. It allowed him to steal one item from any character lower level than himself. Yet, despite its usefulness, Kim knew the true treasure lay elsewhere. The high-purity steel he had obtained was the real prize. Remembering his past as a mining-focused player, he burst into satisfied laughter. While everyone had fixated on the unique weapon, none of them had noticed the worth of the rare metal. The following day, Kim arrived in Fjorandel, a city in the Phoenix Bazaar region. Surrounded by high-level players adorned in extravagant gear, he stared with awe and excitement. He wondered aloud how much money they must be making. Then, with dramatic flair, he declared he could smell the sin of money in the air. But his excitement faded as reality hit him. Before making money, he needed proper gear. The memory of being killed in one hit by a monster 9 levels below him still shook him. When he checked his equipment, he finally understood why he had died so easily. He was still wearing his old, tattered armor from level 3. The stats were so bad it even granted negative defense. He stood there stunned, horrified at himself. Suddenly, the goblin screamed loudly, drawing his attention. Kim turned to it irritably, warning that if it caused trouble in the village, he would be furious. But before he could finish scolding, a massive monster loomed in front of him, making him scream in terror. A boss-level monster here, he panicked, shouting at the goblin to protect him immediately. Before Kim could react further, a voice calmly addressed him. Turning, he saw a powerful, beautiful woman perched casually atop the monster. She introduced herself as Irene and commented that she had never seen anyone use a goblin as a summoned creature. Kim stared, stunned to realize the monster was not wild at all, it was under her control. Irene explained that Michelle, the monster, behaved obediently within the village. Despite her reassurance, Kim's anxiety grew as the drooling beast stared at him intensely. When he looked at Irene, he instantly sensed her overwhelming strength. He didn't need a fight to know this woman was undeniably powerful. Even guilds like Everton would be helpless against her. Irene approached Kim gently and addressed him with a soft, elegant tone, asking the sweet little one for his name. Kim hesitated before replying, Kim Chil-soo, but Irene smiled and told him she hadn't been talking to him, she meant the goblin. She asked if it had a name and questioned why he hadn't given it one. Annoyed, Kim replied that naming a summoned monster was pointless. He scoffed when she called the goblin cute. Irene smiled patiently and remarked that one-sided relationships rarely lasted. She told Kim to really look at his goblin because the moment he ordered it to protect him, it had taken a defensive stance without hesitation. The loyalty was obvious, even without a name. With a gentle smile, she told Kim she hoped he wouldn't be too boring the next time they met. Bidding him farewell by name, Kim Ch-soo, she ordered Michelle to move. Kim shouted sarcastically after her, insisting he didn't need her advice at all and that he and his goblin had zero problems. Then he ordered his goblin to follow him. Later, Kim browsed a gear shop where an NPC, Humphrey the Sharp-Tongued, glared at him with open contempt. Humphrey criticized his outfit harshly, saying his clothes were literal trash and that wearing actual garbage would be an improvement. Flustered, Kim insisted that was why he was there, to buy proper equipment. Mocking him, Humphrey presented a piece of heavy metal armor and sarcastically declared it perfect for someone like him. Kim's eyes widened when he saw the price, 350 gold, roughly $40 in real money. As he debated the cost, he realized that even with a top-tier summoned creature, he would still die instantly if he had no defense. Reliable gear was essential, so reluctantly but decisively, Kim bought the armor. Still eager, he put on the new armor and immediately felt thrilled. "This armor is really nice," he said, right before screaming in frustration as he realized he couldn't move an inch. The armor was far too heavy. Humphrey watched him struggle and casually remarked that people like Kim shouldn't be moving anyway. Kim quickly understood the problem. He had dumped every stat point into agility during the steel giant battle. Now wearing heavy armor was impossible. He needed to sell it immediately. Humphrey offered to buy it back for only 30 gold and then mocked the armor as worthless garbage, which sent Kim into a furious outburst. Being ripped off by an NPC infuriated him even more. Then Kim noticed a glowing golden exclamation mark above Humphrey's head. Puzzled, he asked about it. Humphrey frantically looked around, insisting he didn't see anything, until he suddenly realized his special blacksmith hammer was missing. He screamed in frustration, explaining he couldn't craft anything without it. Kim coldly pointed out that Humphrey had plenty of other hammers, but Humphrey insisted this particular one was different and absolutely essential. He said the hammer was lost inside the underground waterway dungeon near the village entrance and demanded Kim retrieve it immediately. A system message appeared. Quest received. Humphrey's problem. Reward: ability to refine materials into armor. Kim's eyes widened. He suddenly understood why the rare materials he obtained from the hidden monster were so valuable. They could be used to forge high-tier equipment. Grinning wickedly, he accepted the quest and repeated the dungeon name confidently: Underground Waterway.
Guys, that's the end of the video. If you liked this video, please leave a comment in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Like the video and share it too. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.